Well, as I mentioned, Friday's funding deadline for multiple government agency is, it's approaching. Leaders from both chambers of Congress will meet with President Biden tomorrow at the White House after negotiations throughout the weekend failed to net an agreement. According to House Speaker Mike Johnson, much of the delay can be attributed to new spending demands from Democrats. Now, this comes at a time when the Biden administration has asked for additional emergency spending that includes more than $60 billion for war aid to Ukraine. And that apparently is what he's going to be pressing the House Speaker for tomorrow. Now, here's the question. Why should we even be talking about funding Ukraine when funding for our own government is in question? Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Ron Estes. He serves on the House Committee on Ways and Means and the House Budget Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Kansas. Congressman Estes, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back.
So when Congress returns this week, the appropriations bills will be top priority. I think you've made seventh of the 12 through the process. What do you expect is going to happen this week? Seven
of the 12 have passed through the House. Unfortunately, nothing has been passed into law through the House and the Senate. And so at the end of this week, 4 of the 12 appropriations bills expire based on the continuing resolution that's set out there. And so what's really appalling to me and concerning as we look at it is the administration and the Senate doesn't want to focus on how do we keep America running forward and not busting the debt. I mean, we're already seeing we're $34 trillion in debt. That's a sharp run up, and it's growing by about $2 trillion a year through that process. And we've got to do some things differently. We've got to focus on how do we rein in the spending. We're receiving more in tax revenue that we've been receiving. And unfortunately, instead, they're trying to play games. And we see the Senate would not pass a bill to protect our southern border. Instead, they want to fund money through special supplemental instead of finishing appropriations to fund our own government and to fund our southern border.
Congressman Estes, good point. When we look at what happened last week in Athens, Georgia, where nursing student Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela, I mean, I would think that we're going to see a defining moment in Washington this week with this confrontation between conservatives saying it's time to secure our border and the administration pushing for more government funding.
It really is. And the sad part is we don't need additional laws. I mean, the president has the laws that he can enforce. I mean, President Biden has taken 60 different steps when he first came into office to undo what was being done successfully during the Trump administration. So the laws are on the books, work overwhelmingly to help support things like the Remain in Mexico policy, which would solve 70 to 80% of our problem, according to our conversations with the Border Patrol agents. If the Biden administration would just enforce the laws to protect the country, the laws that are on the books would actually help America. I mean, you wouldn't see these terrible deaths, these atrocities and these other crimes being committed by the illegal aliens that have been brought into the country and allowed to stay here and then released to roam throughout the countryside.
Right. And, of course, that's not even bringing up the issue of the drugs, fentanyl, that's coming across the border and the devastating effect that has had. So tomorrow, as the congressional leaders, the House Speaker, the Minority Leader, and the Senate leadership meets with the President, of course, the President's going to be pushing for the $95 billion aid package, primarily going to Ukraine. What do you see as the outcome here? Do you think that the president is going to throw in a few tidbits to address the border? As you pointed out, he doesn't need more laws. He can do it. Will he announce tomorrow, you think, that he's going to do some, kind of window dressing at the border to try to force Republicans to fund government?
I think he will probably try that, if not tomorrow, then in the next few weeks. it's an election year, so he's very astute to that in terms of focusing on how he can get himself reelected. So I don't doubt at all that he will say something that sounds like he's fixing the border when in reality he's caused the problem. And the real focus right now needs to be on how do we fund the government? How do we do it in a sustainable way that moves forward? Unfortunately, Senate leadership, 2 of the 4 congressional leaders that will be there have already passed a bill where they want to increase funding supplemental outside the United States and not focusing on the U.S. Budget and protecting our country. And instead, you'll see the pressure being put on Speaker Johnson. We all need to support him and standing firm for the issues that are important for the United States.
So with these appropriations bills, as you said, the House has moved 7 of the 12. None have gone all the way through the process. The clock is ticking. What do you think is going to be the likely outcome? I mean, the options are, somehow the Senate goes to work, which I haven't done in a while, so I doubt that's going to happen. There's going to be another continuing resolution funding government. I doubt that's going to happen because if you do a CR through the end of the year, it triggers budget cuts, not big, but about a 1% reduction. The other option then is an omnibus. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, you're right. Those are kind of the 3 options to look at: is a year-long CR, which has a relatively modest 1% cut in spending, or shutting the government down, which, although it may address some concerns that we have, it doesn't actually solve the problems, and so we've got to focus on how do we do the appropriations. I think we're now within our 72-hour window, of which when we communicated when the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives that we wanted to have 72 hours to read the bills before we were expecting people to vote on them. I would not be surprised if a short-term continuing resolution is what comes out of the discussions this week, because it seems like the president and the Senate leadership's not stepping up to help resolve this issue, to help it move forward.
Also, Congressman Estes, if I'm not mistaken, a part of those early agreements by Republicans was no more omnibus, these conglomeration of all these bills put together where it's irresponsible spending, which has brought us to this point of $34 trillion in debt. I would think that would have to be a non-starter with most Republicans.
It really is problematic because, the normal bad habit that's been going on for the last 20 plus years is that the appropriations would not be finalized by September 30th, when they should be done by, and therefore we have a continuing resolution. Usually it backed up to Christmas and the holiday season, in which case the pressure point became so great, and then the omnibus was brought up. Typically, omnibuses are big, bloated spending packages. People know the political games they can play, so they actually say that I'm not going to support the omnibus unless they get their pet project in the project. So you end up seeing a lot more spending, and it's wasteful. And that's really what's led us to this point where we're now at $34 trillion that going to have to be paid back by our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Right. That's just inappropriate for us to be doing.
So, final question for you, Congressman Estes. We should be, right now, working on next year's appropriations bills. I mean, that should be the focus. We're still working on funding the current year that we're in. Do you think that we're going to get back to the regular order of funding the government the way it is supposed to be done? Is that going to happen when we get beyond this current impasse?
Yeah, it's hard to change these bad habits, this muscle memory that exists in Washington, because it's been, like I said, it's been since the 1990s, since the last time all 12 appropriations bills were done by the end of the calendar year, by September 30th, in order to start the new fiscal year. And so it's going to take a lot of leaning in to make that happen. We're already having conversations in the Budget Committee about preparing our congressional budget to start that appropriations for 2025. It's going to take a lot of leaning in, a lot of hard work to actually help change this and turn this boat around because we can't continue doing the same thing that we're doing.
Yeah, but we got to have men and women like you that are willing to keep fighting to get that done, because you're absolutely right. It's not going to happen on its own. It's going to require a concerted effort. And quite frankly, I think you're going to need some reinforcements, because the margins are pretty thin there among Republicans. Congressman Estes, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
All right, great. Thank you.